Hi everyone, I'm Karen Cole from Legal Minded Friends, and if you're new to my channel, welcome. I'm a UK lawyer. I have been working in the justice system for over 4 decades. So my channel will offer you an overview on different aspects of the law. If you haven't seen my previous videos, please check them out. Police on the scene said there was no probable cause. We are going to get into it. Before we get into that, let me just give you a little bit of background in case you haven't seen the other videos, as I like to keep these videos individual so you learn a little bit about the process of law. So, in a nutshell, the off-duty police officer, John O'Keefe, was invited to an after-hours birthday party after they had met up at a local bar with their significant others. The homeowner, another off-duty police officer, was celebrating his son's birthday. So he had invited some people back to his house for a few drinks. Karen Reed, that's Boston officer John O'Keefe's girlfriend, said she had dropped him off around midnight. She went home to bed. In the morning, when he hadn't come home, she returned to the scene to find her boyfriend unresponsive to the left of the front of the property. Police and ambulance were called. John O'Keefe later dies. Karen is then charged with being responsible for his death. The theory by the police is that she got very upset with him and ran him over. So that's where we are. Karen Reed's theory, the defense's theory, is that John O'Keefe went into the property, must have gotten into a fight. Maybe the dog attacked him and they threw him outside, and his body laid out there and froze to death. So why would an experienced officer dump John O'Keefe on his own property? Wouldn't that bring attention to him? Or could the answer be right in front of us? And officers that attended the incident said as much. Let's listen to the first officer on scene.
If you look to the right, there appear to be 3 entries for the dispatch of the officers that were on the scene about which you testified yesterday, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, it has this dispatch log shows that you and then Officer Mullaney and then Sergeant Good all arrived to 32 Fairview that morning within 7 seconds of each other, correct?
That's what it says, yes.
It actually has Officer Mullaney arriving first at 6:09:26. You see that?
Yes.
And you see that it also has 3 seconds later at 6:09:29 you arriving. Is that right?
6:29 it says. Excuse me, it's 6:09, yes.
6:09 and 29 seconds.
Yes, I'm sorry, yep.
That's okay. And then it has Sergeant Good arriving 4 seconds after you at 6:09 and 33 seconds, correct?
Sure, yep.
So all 3 of you, according to the official document generated by Canton Police Department for this event, has Officer Mullaney arriving first, you arriving second, Sergeant Good arriving third, all within 7 seconds of each other, correct?
Correct.
That is completely false, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, you've looked at your dispatch, your dash cam, correct? And clearly, we saw it yesterday. You arrive and there's nobody else on scene.
Correct.
That was at about 6:10 a.m. that you arrived, correct?
About that, yes.
And then Officer Mullaney actually arrives after you about 6:11 a.m. Is that right?
Yes.
And Sergeant Good does not arrive, according to your own dash cam, until about 6:16, a little after 6:15.
Yep.
All right. So right off the bat, the official Canton Police Department dispatch log, one of the first documents generated in any investigative event, that's completely wrong, right?
The times are, yes.
Well, the times and the orders, right? I mean, not only did Officer Mullaney not arrive first, you arrived first.
That's correct.
And then he arrived.
Sure.
So that's 2 things that are wrong about just that, correct?
Sure.
And then it has Sergeant Good arriving 4 seconds after you, which is also incorrect.
Yep.
He didn't arrive until about 6 or 7 minutes after you, right?
Sure.
All right. Officer Sharaf, did you ever think to look inside the house
No.
for that missing shoe?
No.
That never crossed your mind?
No.
You think that might have been a smart thing to do at the time?
Objection, Your Honor.
Rephrase the question.
Sure. Do you think that would have been appropriate protocol when dealing with a body laying on a lawn that is partially unclothed to look inside the house of the lawn?
No.
You didn't think that would have been appropriate protocol?
No.
For you or anybody else?
No.
Obviously, you did not conduct a search of that house, did you?
Nope.
And you're aware that to this day, no law enforcement officer ever conducted a search of that house?
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes. Okay.
Ooh, that's not a good look for police logs to be inaccurate as to who arrived first. Is that important?
Morning, sir.
Morning.
You were asking questions. You were shown a dispatch log. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And dispatch log, as far as the Canton Police Department is concerned, are you aware of sort of how or when or who creates that?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury sort of how that document sort of comes into being?
So when a call comes in, an officer is at the desk, and usually the first thing they would do is dispatch, get people going to the scene, and get everybody rolling as far as if they need FD, police, whatever resources they need, and basically then type in what the call is and who's going.
So fair to say it's more important to get assets allocated to a scene, especially in the case of an emergency, which is why someone's calling 911, than to ensure that the dispatch time is correct down to the second.
Absolutely.
Wait, there's more. In this trial, we hear how evidence was taken and preserved. Let's just say it was a bit of a DIY project rather than following procedures and protocols.
Monday's witnesses focused mostly on an unusual and challenging police investigation in tough weather. Officers blowing the snow off of possible blood evidence, then collecting it in a neighbor's borrowed Solo cup and transporting it in a Stop and Shop bag. Also allegations from the defense that officers actually damaged Karen Reed's taillight in the investigation.
During the removal process, that light was broken even more.
No.
We are told that the state police normally investigate if the incident is considered a homicide, but as John O'Keefe had not been pronounced deceased yet, and to add to it, there was a storm, so the state police did not come out. Let's listen to Lieutenant Gallagher, who started to process the scene after realizing that the state police were not coming out.
I told Detective Sergeant Lake, make sure he has initial statements from everybody present. And that's basically what we did prior to searching the scene itself.
With regard to Sergeant Lang, you told him to make sure that we had statements, your words, we had statements from all the witnesses that were at the scene.
Initial statements, yes.
Does that mean the people inside the house?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe people across the street, if there were people across the street?
No, it didn't include them at the time. It included people that were involved from the prior night's incident. Outing, I would call it.
At the time that you tasked Sergeant Lang with this responsibility, did you know personally that you were standing on the property of Brian Albert?
I did.
Did you also know that Sergeant Lang had an ongoing and a long-time relationship with the Albert family?
Objection.
Did you know that?
I know he knew them. I think you're mischaracterizing the relationship.
Did you see a problem with having somebody who knew the parties taking the initial statements from those parties?
Not at all, Sergeant Lake. No issue at all.
Not in your mind?
Not in my mind.
Were you aware that before you got to the location, that Sergeant Lang had taken it upon himself to already make contact with the individuals in the house?
Objection.
I'm going to see you at sidebar, please.
Lieutenant, just before we went to sidebar, I'd asked a quick question. Were you aware at the time that you tasked Sergeant Lang to go talk to the folks inside the house that he had already gone into the house to talk to them?
Yes, I did.
You indicated that one of the reasons, I'd like to move back, I'm bouncing around a little bit, I apologize.
I understand.
One of the things that you talked about was the preservation of the crime scene and the lack thereof because of the inclement conditions.
Correct.
There was wind blowing from all directions.
Yes.
There was snow falling.
Yes.
It was icy cold out.
Yes.
There was already snow accumulated on the ground, about 4 inches, you said.
At least it was different spots because of the wind drifts.
Wouldn't that be even more of a reason in a potential homicide investigation to adequately preserve the scene as best you possibly could?
Of course.
Wouldn't you want to, for instance, protect the area? You mentioned a tent.
Yes.
Wouldn't you want to make sure that anybody from the civilian side and or officers don't just start traipsing through the middle of the crime scene?
That was all done.
As a matter of fact, the first responders the EMTs had already done what they needed to do in the scene, and Mr. O'Keefe had been transported to the hospital, correct?
That is correct.
So that was not a concern.
No.
So nobody needed to be inside that scene that wasn't authorized to be there,
That's correct.
civilian or officers.
That's correct.
Who was it that told you specifically where John O'Keefe's body was?
I don't recall specifically. I had a collaborative meeting with Sergeant Lank and Sergeant Good.
Were you aware at the time that you had the meeting with Sergeant Lank that Sergeant Lank did not ever see John O'Keefe's body in the position?
Yes, I did. I don't believe Sergeant Good did, to my knowledge. I believe John O'Keefe may have been in the ambulance at that time.
John O'Keefe, I'm sorry, I got a little confused. John O'Keefe may have been in the ambulance at which time?
When some of the officers arrived.
So if that were the case, then they wouldn't have any personal knowledge of where John O'Keefe's body was either.
Not to your precise locations, yes.
You mentioned a tent, and you said that you, in an answer to a question by Mr. Lally, you did not go back to Canton PD to get the tent. You had a tent in your trunk or something?
That's correct.
Okay. When you interviewed with Lieutenant Tully, did he specifically ask you, this is about a month ago, did he ask you about the tent?
I don't recall.
Would it refresh your recollection if you were to review just a small snippet of your report, of his report
Yes.
about your interview?
Yes.
May I approach you on it?
Yes.
If you find a broken glass on somebody's yard in a situation like this, did that seem out of place to you?
They were coming from a bar. It didn't seem totally out of place, no.
At the time that you found the broken glass, would you rationally think, well, maybe the rest of this glass is inside the residence?
No.
You did not think that?
No, there was a reason that I didn't think that.
Did you think that, well, let me ask you this. Did you ever go inside the house to search for the other part of the glass?
Absolutely not.
Because you made up your mind initially where that glass came from.
Objection.
You can answer that, sir.
No.
Did you search the house for any other matching glasses?
No, no,
Matter of fact, you didn't search the house for any physical items, did you?
of course not.
Is that because that house belonged to a Boston police officer?
No, it's because it requires probable cause, as you know, which we did not have.
Or at least you didn't think you had at that time?
We knew we didn't have it.
Did you seek it from a judge?
I'm familiar with what probable cause is.
Did you seek a probable cause warrant from a judge?
No, I did not.
Right. Did you ask for consent to search the house?
We wouldn't do consent, and that's in a death investigation.
Okay, that wasn't my question. My question
No,
was...
I did not.
Okay. Is that because you were at the house of a Boston police officer?
No, it's because we wouldn't do it. Because if consent is denied, we still don't have probable cause, and we still couldn't search the house.
But you never asked, did you?
Never asked.
Well, you heard that right. He thought they had no probable cause, even after finding out John O'Keefe was dropped off and found out he had a glass in his hand. There was no probable cause, really? I tend to agree with the defense on this one. The police do have powers of entry and search of a property. However, they do need permission from the homeowner. If they don't get that permission, then they can get a search warrant from a court. Now, what happens there is they've told the court that there's reasonable grounds for believing that an indictable offense has been committed. So what they're saying is that there could be material on the premise which is likely to be substantial value to an investigation of an offense. So because they've charged Karen Read, I would have thought that because everyone at the bar said that they had invited Karen and John O'Keefe to come over, that they'd have to eliminate that they did actually come over, and that would mean that they'd have to investigate, not just take the people that were at the house's word for it. Does that make sense? By processing the property, they could have eliminated if John O'Keefe was or wasn't there, because they had originally said that John O'Keefe had never been over to their property. So if they would have done that, then it would have eliminated any doubts if he was there or not.
According to your interview with Lieutenant Tully, after going to the scene the first time, you then returned back to Canton Police Department, correct?
Yes,
At that point, you remember having a conversation with Chief Berkowitz, correct?
that is correct.
And you indicated that having that conversation with Chief Berkowitz, that was about Canton Police Department recusing themselves.
Not doing any further investigative interviews, yes.
And you indicated actually in that conversation that you agreed with Chief Berkowitz that Canton should be recused, correct?
He agreed with me.
Was your assessment that the recusal should take place?
Yes, it was.
And he agreed?
That is correct.
Okay. And the reason for that recusal was because of the relationship between the Albert family and the Canton Police Department?
No.
What was the reason for the recusal?
The reason was we had a Boston police officer on another Boston police officer's lawn or property, and that property owner was the brother of somebody in our investigative unit.
Okay. That's one way to put it. Another way to put it would be because of the Albert family having a relationship with the Canton Police Department.
It has to do with Detective Albert having a relationship with his family.
Right. Or the other side of that is his family having a relationship with Canton Police Department.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. Go ahead. Move on, please.
What time was that conversation with Chief Berkowitz?
It was after 8 a.m. when we got back to the police department.
You then traveled back to 34 Fairview to interview the homeowners with Sergeant Lang?
Sergeant Lake was doing the interviews, yes, but I accompanied him.
Okay. Approximately what time did you arrive back at 34 Fairview to engage these interviews?
Approximately 9 o'clock.
Were you and Sergeant Lank well, let me ask this. At that time, did you know whether Sergeant Lank had already gone into the home?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so you knew that you were not the first person to go in and make contact with the individuals inside the home. That was Sergeant Lank
Sergeant Lake and Sergeant Good, correct.
before you ever got there?
Correct.
Okay. Did they show you any documentation, notes, or anything of that initial interview?
No.
Do you know whether or not they took notes of that initial interview?
I don't.
Do you know whether they recorded that initial interview?
I know they did not.
You indicated that you personally knew Brian Albert. Is that right?
I knew him since I became a police officer, yes.
And so you indicated that you had a professional relationship with him, but not necessarily a personal relationship with him.
Correct.
Did you know that he was in the house before you walked in the house?
No, I did not.
What was your your professional interaction with Brian Albert before you walked into that house that day?
Previously?
Correct.
So in general, as a detective, he was with the fugitive unit at one point. He was helpful when we had a fugitive we needed to apprehend in Boston, things of that nature, job-related things.
Had you ever, for lack of a better phrase, hung out with Brian Albert?
Not a day.
Never socialized with him?
No. Not intentionally. It's possible if I went to a retirement party, could he have been present? Possibly, but not that I'm aware.
But you had no social relationship with him?
Zero.
You indicated that there were 5 or 6 people inside the house, including Brian Albert and Jennifer McCabe.
Yes,
Right?
that is correct.
So you clearly knew those 2 people.
I didn't know Jen McCabe. I know that Sergeant Lake was going to speak with her, but I didn't know her personally. I never had a conversation with her.
What was it about Jen McCabe that you recalled, as opposed to the other 4 or 5 people that were in the house?
Sergeant Lake was talking to her.
You just remember that name?
That's who he went to talk to.
Got it. So he went back specifically with the intent of talking to Jennifer McCabe.
That's correct.
That's when you accompanied him.
That is correct.
Was that interview recorded?
No,
Did you take any notes about that interview?
I did not.
Did you write a report about that interview?
I did not.
You said that there were, other than Brian Albert and Jennifer McCabe, there were 3 or 4 other people in the house.
Yes.
Were those 3 or 4 other people in the house at the time that John O'Keefe was found dead or dying on the lawn?
I don't have the answer to that.
Did you think that might have been an important thing to find out?
Again, I didn't think of that at that time, and I didn't think it was important at that time. I knew that Sergeant Lake had already interviewed people in the house.
You had what you knew at that time, Lieutenant, was you had an officer, a Boston police officer, who was either dead or dying on the front lawn of a house with a bunch of occupants, and you didn't think that it was necessary to investigate or interview those occupants yourself?
No, I did not. At that time, I wanted to not participate in investigative interviews.
You did tell Lieutenant Tully in your interview with him, you volunteered that Brian Higgins was not present when you went back to the house, correct?
I didn't believe he was.
What, you didn't believe he was?
No, I don't recall Brian Higgins being there.
Okay.
I don't recall who the other people were at that time.
But Brian Higgins was not one of them.
I don't know the answer to that. He could have been. I can't say with certainty.
You know Brian Higgins?
I do.
Obviously, you know him well.
I do.
In fact, you occupy sort of the same space at Canton PD, correct?
That is correct.
You might see him most days out of the week.
No, but I know him.
Okay. As a matter of fact, you've got a social relationship with Brian Higgins as well.
I have been social with Brian Higgins, yes.
So you know him professionally and socially. You can't tell the jurors whether or not he was in that home when you went back over there to interview individuals about a Boston police officer who had fallen and was either dead or dying on the front lawn.
Objection.
Go ahead and answer that, sir.
I can't answer that question. I had no conversation with Brian Higgins, so I don't recall.
Think of this a different way. If you were all meeting up at a restaurant and your friends said they were coming and they didn't show, but they were later found in the parking lot with vomit and severe injuries, would you expect the police to investigate the restaurant? So the friends say, no, I didn't see him show up. What if he did show up, but he didn't see you guys because you were behind some flowers or some plants, who knows, hidden. And so he ordered some food from the restaurant, and that food had botulism. Whatever, there could be many different reasons why the restaurant should be processed. And this is why the property at the Alberts should have been processed. John O'Keefe was found there. We don't know if he went in to the property or not, because everybody says he didn't, but we don't know if he did or not, right? We don't know, and we'll never know, because there was no process of inside the property. No swabs taken. I mean, they had said that John O'Keefe had never been there, so I would expect his DNA to be nowhere near there. So they could have done, fingerprinting and stuff like that. It is interesting that Mrs. Albert said she cleaned the bathroom. She was cleaning, so that gave an excuse for why everything was wiped down. So this could have also shown us that the absence of evidence because of cleaning. The issue that I have is that we'll never ever know because what they did next. Let's look at some coincidences. That the Alberts family dog was rehomed months after this incident. As soon as the defense started to say, could it have been a dog attack? It is also a coincidence that the Alberts family home was sold not long after this incident. And finally, is it a coincidence before selling their property, they had the basement floor replaced? And here's another coincidence. It's being alleged that telephone communications went back and forth with the Alberts family and others. And Brian Albert's sister was researching on the internet how long to die in cold at 2:27 a.m. in the morning, long after Karen Read dropped John O'Keefe off. And that's why the defense attorney was making such a big deal about who was present when the people in the house were being interviewed that morning.
Jackson says prosecutors never told the state grand jury that indicted Read that Jennifer McCabe, one of the state's witnesses, Googled how long to die in cold. He says the FBI has concluded the search was run at 2:27 a.m. Prosecutor Adam Lally says other experts have determined the search happened hours later, immediately after O'Keefe's body was found.
There was no fight. There was no dog attack. There was no eyewitness to the circumstances that led to Mr. O'Keefe's death.
Lally says the federal investigation found no indication of a cover-up.
So that evidence will be intriguing to see how the cell phone experts interpret that. The investigation did not extend into the property. Now, could the allegations be true? They dumped John O'Keefe outside knowing the police would not have probable cause? None of the party guests when leaving saw John O'Keefe laying in the front lawn. What's that saying? Hiding something in plain sight? With the weather conditions heavy, with snow and winds, people leaving would be more focused on getting into their warm cars. What do you think? By leaving a comment, you may help someone else that will read your comment. And of course, I love to read all comments as they are valued, and together we can be more informed. And this information may help you or someone you know. In the meantime, on this channel, you'll find a variety of playlists to suit every curiosity about the justice system, and we provide you with a visual to information and the process. Please like this video if you like this kind of content. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you want to be notified when I'm going live or upload another video. I'm Karen Cole from Legal Minded Friends. Information is power, meaning if you know something, you can make decisions that are right for you.